Yes, Stan, I will stand here and talk. It appears the system is now working. So thank you. Sorry for the slight delay while we got technology up and running, but welcome to the Timbercrest All-Resident Meeting for May. I'd like to welcome Manor residents who can be here in person today, those who are watching the live video this morning, either in the Manor or in the neighborhood homes, and to remind anyone who does get the message that this recording will be available on YouTube so that they can watch it in the future. And I'd like to invite Nan Urbaugh to start us off with a prayer this morning.
Everything goes better when we start with prayer, doesn't it? Yes. Let's pray. Loving God, we are thankful for the beauty of this season, your creation. And we're grateful to gather together here today to get updates on Timbercrest, the place we all call home. God, even as we share concerns and who knows, perhaps disagree, may we remember to treat each other with kindness and respect, always listening with an open mind and an open heart. Be with us this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Today's agenda really deals with updates from Stan Knopfsinger and Christy Heuris, our CEO and COO for Timbercrest, and they'll be presenting in that order. And thank you.
I'm no longer out of breath for the extra duties that I had to do this morning on the audiovisual system. It's amazing what happens when we're surprised with extra responsibilities. But you know what? That seems to be a bit of the nature of life at Timbercrest these days, doesn't it? Every day, every new day brings a variety of things our way that we may or may not be prepared for. And it is our creativity and our energy that allows us to try to take each of those things in stride. I think each and every one of us here at Timbercrest understands what taking life in stride each day is all about. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you this morning. It's a real privilege to be able to serve as one of your employees for the care and the well-being of this entire community. And I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for the support that I feel from all of you. We are working as hard as we can to make this community of people, you as residents, the staff, and the neighborhood at large, feel a part of what is happening at Timbercrest. Well, A Street's just about done, and we are so grateful to see contractors move out of that portion of the building. We still have a number of lights that need to be installed. They are due in within the next month. That's kind of what happens in this day of supply lines that take forever. They didn't arrive on time and they had to be reordered, and now we await for them, and we'll be glad when they come. At the resident council meeting, a question was raised about the picture rail and what the plans were for putting things up in A Street for decoration and for announcement. Number one, you've seen in the very western side of A Street that we're putting up the wall of history, if you will, and getting those pictures up. And we're trying to organize those in a way that goes from oldest to newest. The biggest conversation we're having is, should we do oldest on the left side and go right, or right side and go left? Don't worry, we're not spending a whole lot of time. But it was interesting to hear the different perspectives of staff of which direction history ought to run. I wonder if that's a conversation we ought to have as a nation. Anyway, just never mind. Now for the picture rail. We are going to have space identified by program and service for the bulletin boards that used to appear there. Our plan is, and we've gone a long way in getting this done, and it'll start June the 1st. We have contacted quite a number of local artists, including Manchester University Art Department. And we hope to use that long hallway down to the canteen to have a continually changing display of local artists. And right now we have about 2 years worth of art planned for. Each of the artists will have about 6 weeks in order to put their artwork up there and to put it on display. Now, our intention with that may not have been yours, but our intention was, one, to bring artwork into the manor that is fresh, and it represents a lot of variety from our community. It also gives us a chance to see what university students are doing in the art department. And yes, we will screen what gets put up. My son was one of those artists in the art departments, and there are a number of pictures that are in the attic of the farmhouse because I wouldn't put them up in my house. That's kind of the way art studies are, and we'll be certain to be careful what gets put up. There will be a place, and program and service and the management team are working on locations for the bulletin boards so that we have space and place for the display of art from residents, the sweaters, etc. So be patient with us as we get that underway. We are pleased that the furniture has started to arrive for the patio area and also for the chef's nook. And our maintenance department will be assembling that over the next month. Once it's all done, we're going to have a grand opening, and we'll let you know and announce that when it comes. Probably the bigger thing that's on your mind, I know it occupies just about every day for me, is what's happening in E and F wing, D wing, the lobbies, the restrooms in the front. Boy, when that event took place at the end of November, I would have told you, we'll be back in there by summer. Boy, did I miscalculate. Your staff has worked very, very hard to keep the project moving along. We had to wait a substantial amount of time for the insurance company adjuster to give us the go-ahead to develop the scope of work and then to secure bids for the project and then to submit the bids to the insurance company, which we have duly done. The bid, and this is probably the most difficult part of what frustrates me right now is that the best estimate, and please underscore estimate, on completing the restoration is 28 weeks once the work begins. Now, that's not because contractors are being slow and putting us off. It is because of supply chain. It's taking 10 to 12 weeks for carpet. It's taking 12 to 16 weeks for cabinetry once we order it. Some of it, we did not have a big response of contractors bidding on it because they don't have enough employees to take on this large of a job. And so that's news, but that's not the kind of news I want to give you. The bid is in the hands of the insurance company now. I have talked with the president of the company and asked him to please expedite it as quickly as possible so we can get started. That's not the news. I wanted to tell you that work was going to start next week, but I'm not going to do that. I don't know when. I don't have a clue when we're going to get permission to start. I'm really sorry. In the meantime, what we want to do is Mary Beth is going to be talking with each one of the residents that were displaced and living somewhere else. And we're going to be asking them, given the information that we have now, and it will be totally their choice, whether or not they want to wait for their apartment to become available, or if there is another apartment at Timbercrest that meets their needs. And if it's filled with somebody's goods, we'll clean it out and we will adapt it and paint it and make it ready for them so that they can, as quickly as possible, get resettled into a new home. When I shared this news on Tuesday with the resident council, Ann Myers, my stepsister, she had an interesting perspective. And I thought, what's Ann going to do? Because she doesn't mince words with anyone, especially with her brother. Ann says, it's interesting because I've lived on D-Wing now quite a long time, and I've become a part of that community. And my neighbors are my neighbors. And moving back to F-Wing is going to seem like moving into a new community again. Isn't that interesting perspective? And I only share that to help all of us understand the impact of this disaster on every one of our residents who are affected by it. Just know that I'm doing everything that I can to keep the project moving. I'm calling almost daily to the insurance company to push them to get started, and I will commit to continually doing that on your behalf. This Saturday, the Board of Directors will be meeting once again by Zoom. It seems like a long time since we've had a face-to-face meeting, and it's kind of like some of the experiences you've had here about being with family and friends in large settings. And we feel that in a number of ways, and the board feels the same way. This week's meeting is the open meeting is not very descriptive. Not a lot of descriptive things happening. A review of the first quarter financial statements. We will be working on that. We'll be having conversations around the water restoration project and where we are with that. So it's kind of a routine meeting. We have a code of conduct document that each year has to be reviewed by the board, and they have to reauthorize it. That's on the agenda. And at the close of those items, the board will go into a closed session. And I can tell you what's on the agenda, and that is more work on the strategic plan for what the board envisions moving from this place forward. And that will probably be a fairly long meeting because we want to get that project finished. At the last board meeting, the board approved a new mission statement and a new vision statement, and you'll begin to see them in our publications, and at some point we will have them printed up nicely and put up so people can see them. The mission statement as adopted by the board reads as follows: sustaining a vibrant community that values a culture of dignity and compassion. That's pretty Timbercrest, isn't it? Sustaining a vibrant community that values a culture of dignity and compassion. And the vision statement that was adopted is building a trustworthy, collaborative, and innovative future together. Building a trustworthy, collaborative, and innovative future together. The board tried to keep the number of words as few as possible and as succinct as possible, because we hope that we'll be able to retain these in our mind so that each day as staff comes to work or we work together at resident council or all resident meeting, we can all remember what our mission is and what our vision is, how we want to move forward. So you'll begin to see those statements. I think that concludes the items that I want to share with you this morning. Keep in mind what questions you might want to ask until Christy's finished, and then we'll be glad to answer your questions.
Good morning. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about a few things that we are addressing from an operational aspect. And over the past couple of years, as you know, COVID has challenged organizations like Timbercrest in about every way imaginable. However, we're coming out of that. Excuse me. And while we weren't exempt from those challenges, Timbercrest has done a very amazing job at keeping our infection rates low and keeping people healthy. And so we recognize that you are a big part of that, and all the efforts that you've made. Your visitors, when they've been able to come in, have done a fantastic job, and our staff have done very well as well. Even so, I want to remind us that we do still need to remain diligent in our efforts to keep those infections low as possible here at Timbercrest. And the reason for that is, even though things have improved throughout the state and even in our local community, we are experiencing an uptick in infection rates. So we just want to remind you that the best way for you to reduce your risk of infection, even though you may have been vaccinated and boosted once or twice even, just to continue to wear your mask when you're out and about in the community. Keep your hands cleansed, wash them frequently, or use the alcohol-based hand rub, and then continue to try to distance from others as much as you're able to. With that said, we have been able here at Timbercrest to make some changes to kind of bring some normalcy back into our community. And you've been able to receive visitors in your apartment, bring them to the dining rooms now for meals. You're able to eat with one another at the same table, which I think is fantastic. Neighborhood home residents are now able to make reservations and eat in our dining room with us, or even as your guest if you wish. So those are all things that really are helping us build back our community and be a group of people who relate well with one another, and in that Timbercrest fashion, be supportive of one another. So we are very thankful for those things. We continue to welcome visitors, and that brings a lot of activity into the community as well, which brings life. Thankful for that. We do want to remind you and your visitors that if they're coming to visit you, they need to go directly to your apartment or a visiting area such as M-Wing, and then exit the building in a manner that limits their time in the building in the places that they've been. That's just an infection control standard that we have in place here to try to keep those infections, again, down to a minimum. Some of you have asked if we can return to hosting overnight guests or large gatherings. As much as we would like for that to happen, again, it's hard to manage, and we have to be able to manage that. So we are not able to do those kinds of things at this moment yet. We will continue to look for ways to be able to do things to return us back to the way we were, to the best of our ability prior to COVID, but it's a different situation and a different environment that we're in, and I'm afraid that some of the things that we used to be able to do, we may not be able to do quite like we did before, but find a new way to do some of those things. So right now, I just wanted to let you know that we do keep those things in mind, and as much as we like for them to happen, just right now, we're not able to do that. Lastly, as far as COVID goes, we are pleased to announce that we are going to be able to close the COVID wing in healthcare. That is due to some changes in regulations that allow people who have been exposed to COVID or have even tested positive for COVID to remain in their apartment or their room to recover for that isolation or quarantine period. And the only time that that would not be permitted is if a person requires additional medical care. And that then would necessitate a short-term stay in healthcare. So just, we're pleased that that's happening, and that actually helps Timbercrest to be able to use those rooms for other things rather than sitting idle. Because as you know, we haven't had much need for that wing, and we're very grateful for that. But at the same time, it's wasted space if we're not using it. So we would like to be able to start using that again. Which leads me into my next point is I want to talk a little bit about healthcare staffing and census levels. You may remember about a year ago, we put a hold on admissions into healthcare. Since that time, it was just a couple months later, we're then able to open up again and start receiving admissions because our staffing levels have improved. And the reason for that was we wanted to make sure that the residents who are living in healthcare receive the quality care that they were entitled to. And so when the staffing level improved, we were then able to receive more admissions. Now that some of that time has passed, we are thankful again to report that we have been able to hire more nursing staff in recent weeks. A lot more interest and applications are being received for quality staffing, and we're starting to now balance between staffing and admissions. And it's a complicated process maybe, but we have to have enough staff to be able to admit more folks, and then we have to have enough residents to be able to accommodate more staffing. So we're balancing that out. We're working through that process, and so you'll be seeing probably more admissions to healthcare in the coming weeks. In January, we implemented the first phase of an electronic door control system to increase the security and safety of the manor building. And that is to aid in the security of both residents and staff who are on duty, even in the late nighttime hours. And so management began actually to work on this process before COVID, but because of COVID and some supply issues that Stan already talked about and labor issues, that process really got delayed and equipment didn't arrive when we wanted it to. So finally in January, we were able to install this system. And then because of COVID, as you know, the extra entrances throughout the building were locked so that we could control entrance into the building through 2 or 3 entrances, which are the front or main entrance, the hub entrance, and then we have begun to start using the healthcare entrance for healthcare staff at this time. Residential residents then were provided with a little key fob style token to be able to access the building and those electronic controls, and those are working pretty well. I'll get more to that in a minute. Employees use little access cards like this one that I'm wearing, and visitors, and I'm even including neighborhood home residents, are required to push an alert button after they've screened in to be able to gain access. That way we know who's coming in the building and we can see what's happening. It's our goal, though, to also give a token of some kind or an access card to neighborhood home residents at some point. Again, the supply order is delayed, and so we're not sure when that will happen, but that is one of our goals for the next several weeks. If a neighborhood home resident wishes to have one of these, they'll have an opportunity to request one. Lastly, that door access control, we've noticed that we've had some problems with it, and we are waiting on new equipment to arrive to fix those problems. The problems tend to be mostly with the employee access card rather than the resident access token. Residents seem to be able to come and go from the manor pretty easily with that. However, I just wanted to note that if you do have trouble, there's always the alert button on the wall. Be sure to press that alert button and it will ring a telephone of one of the staff members on duty. So be patient, someone should answer your call. But if you ever have that problem, I just wanted to make note that you do have access to assistance by pushing that alert button. Often I'm approached about whether or not an employee can accept a gift from a resident. And so I wanted to talk about that just a little bit with you. Part of our compliance and ethics program is that we do not permit employees to accept gifts. And so I wanted to read you just a portion of that policy to kind of give some meaning to the reason why. While residents, patients, and families often wish to show their appreciation for the care and services rendered by Timbercrest staff, Timbercrest must ensure that residents, patients, and family members do not feel obliged to give Timbercrest or its staff gifts or gratitudes in order to assure a resident or patient receives quality care. Accordingly, it is Timbercrest policy that employees may not accept gifts or gratuities directly from residents or patients for whom Timbercrest provides care, or from the residents or patients' families or friends. So a staff person is any person that's a hired employee, a contracted employee or provider, or a volunteer. So we ask for your understanding if a gift that you are trying to give to a staff member is graciously declined. We remind employees of this frequently, and so if you have concerns, you can bring those to me or to Stan Knopfsinger for us to look into. Now onto the subject of food. Food is a very important part of our lives, isn't it? It satisfies our physical need for energy, but we've also grown accustomed to the many pleasures a meal can provide to us as well. It can be a welcome break from the busyness of a day, or maybe it's accompanied by good fellowship with friends and family, but mostly how our food tastes and looks is a part of that experience too. So do you have ideas that you wish were heard about your dining experiences here at Timbercrest? Well, there's good news. We want to hear from you, and there are ways you can make that happen. First, you can always talk with Stephen Watkins. He's the Director of Dining Services, or to Angel Nance, who's the Assistant Director. They are good listeners, and they want to find the way to meet your preferences and needs. Secondly, Timbercrest has a dining services roundtable where you can provide feedback on your experiences and ideas. The roundtable is also an opportunity of the dining service managers to share with you their plans for developing and enhancing your dining experience. Any resident of the Timbercrest community is welcome to attend. There is no committee membership required. The roundtable meets monthly, typically the last Friday of the month. So the next meeting will be Friday, May 27th at 2:00. The meetings are held in the education room at the lower level near the front office. So we hope that you consider attending that meeting. There are also comment cards available at the courtyard dining room if you ever wish to put your comments in writing. The last topic I have is talking about compliance. I touched a little bit on this when we talked about gifts to employees, but I wanted to go a little bit into Timbercrest compliance program to give you an understanding of how important it is and the importance that management, Stan and I, other managers, and then the board of directors also place on compliance. Each year we develop a work and audit plan to set goals for the year's work. And the plan includes routine audits to ensure our compliance program works as it should. One of the audits we like to conduct every year is a skilled nursing facility mock survey. This review is always done by a third party, so we make sure we get a good picture of the improvements we need to make. Friends Services Alliance, or FSA for short, is our compliance consultant firm. they conducted this review for us at the end of at the end of March this year. And it's their goal always to find as many things about that can be improved upon as they can. And so in their terms, they nitpick. But that's what we want. We want to know where it is that a fresh set of eyes can take a look at Timbercrest and what we do in healthcare, and how we can make it better. So this year, the mock survey did identify a few, as it usually does, areas for us to improve upon. So it just takes staff some time to identify processes, how we might adjust our policy and our procedures to account for those things. None of the things that the surveyors found were critically high-risk areas. They were just things that we needed to improve upon, such as documentation or making sure a physician signed a document that got missed. And so there's a few things that are riskier than others, but none of them were high-risk situations. And the second thing about compliance is that the board of directors last year identified that during their board meetings, they were really able to give a lot of discussion time to compliance. So they decided that they wanted to create a compliance committee at the board level. And so that committee started functioning late last year. And I have been meeting, and Stan too, been meeting with them to talk about where Timbercrest is on their program and how we can fine tune it and make it what it really needs to be to make Timbercrest the best place for us all to live and to work. So those are some things that we are doing and accomplishing just most recently to be able to ensure that compliance and ethics are held to the highest standard that we can here at Timbercrest. And that completes my report.
Thank you. That does leave us some time to respond to any questions that you might have to direct to Stan, Christy, or myself. So we'll take that opportunity if you have any questions. And if you do have one, I'll try to repeat it so that people that are listening to the recording outside the chapel will know what the question was. Any questions concerning anything? Yes. I don't know, but I'll pass it on. I forgot to repeat it. So please.
Wanda asked, why does her key fob not work at the healthcare door? And that was designed intentionally to limit access into healthcare. If there are reasons why a resident should be entering and exiting through healthcare, we can address that. Just give me an opportunity to do that. Stop by and talk to me, and we'll figure that out. So that would be an acceptable reason. So you just need to come and talk to me, and we'll try to get that situated.
Another question. Thank you. Yes.
Wanda also brings up a good point that as far as resident gifts to employees is concerned, we have established an employee Christmas bonus fund so that any kinds of tip money or gifts that are turned in go into that fund so they can be shared and distributed evenly among staff. As you know, it takes not one department to accomplish the task of dining services. We have housekeeping who maintains the environment. Maintenance helps maintain that environment. Administration helps make reservations. There's a whole team of people that are involved in about every aspect of the Timbercrest organization. So our philosophy has always been, if tips are received or gifts are made, and we call for gifts during the Christmas season, Those are contributed to the Employee Christmas Bonus Fund, and we distribute it evenly across the entire employee population.
I believe there was a question here. Yes. Thank you. The question deals with the occupancy rate of apartments in the manor, and there are quite a few vacancies. And the question dealt with what plans are in place to deal with that in the future.
Great question, and it's of deep concern for all of us. Number one, with the relocation of people out of E&F wing, there were 13 apartments that were initially affected by that disaster. So we occupied 13. There were at one time 40, I believe it was 45, 46 empty apartments. So subtract 13. And then we had an additional, I'm trying to do the figure in my head and I shouldn't do that. I'm not a mathematician. In total, there were 33 apartments that were unoccupied that now have either people or their belongings in. So 33 out of that 45 are occupied. Now, in our insurance policy, we have unrealized business income loss clause, and we will be turning all of that in because that people being in those apartments means that we can't market them and they aren't available for entry. So we'll be submitting that to the insurance company as well. Matter of fact, we have several people who already want to move in, either in one of those occupied apartments or in, I believe it is in E-Wing, we have one or two that have already signed contracts knowing that they can't move in until the work is done on the whole wing. And so we're moving forward to try to fill things, and we have people that want to move in. Our first issue is we have to get people back into their apartments and find a place for all their belongings, which we thought was going to just be temporary and short term. So it's a challenge to market right now because of those 33 occupied apartments, because of what has happened in E&F wing. We are continuing with marketing experiences. We've had very good success recently with marketing that has been done on cable TV, even more so than when we had advertisements on Fort Wayne channels. It's amazing. Heather and Mary Beth have had some marketing programs on regional cable TV. So we actually so it's not on the primary stations, it's on kind of the off stations that are more local. And we're actually getting a bit more response out of those than we are out of the big market. And it's a whole lot less expensive to do. That's number one. Number two, I'll be talking with the board at this meeting about a proposal that we have from a marketing plan company that really will help us once we get these apartments available, or we see that they're going to be available, and there will be concentrated effort. I would finish by saying that what you're experiencing here is happening in continuing care communities all across the nation. I was at a meeting last week of nonprofit, faith-based homes like Timbercrest, or communities like Timbercrest, that are part of the Peace Church insurance groups. And almost all of us are suffering from a low census. It is a nationwide phenomenon. And so it's not unusual, and it's frightening. There have been facilities that have said we can't go on, and they've either sold or they've closed, not a lot, but a few. And there are others that are merging to find better cost containment, and others who are saying we're going to move out of this. One of the one of the real strengths of Timbercrest has been that your board of directors has been very prudent in the last several decades in saving into a board-directed endowment fund, which means that they have the ability to use that money as they will. There's also a restricted endowment where people have given to very specific things, and only the interest off of that can be used. So we don't have access to that, but we have several $1 million that have really been the saving grace for Timbercrest during this time. We continue literally to not have public debt. And that has been the strength of Timbercrest and what's carried us through to this point. Now, we can't rest on that laurel forever. But we got to get this, number one, we got to get through the pandemic so that we open up and people want to be a part of licensed communities like this. And number two, get the restoration project done. So we're watching it very carefully. And we think we actually have pretty good safeguards in place to carry us through to that time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Let's do them one at a time. Then we can get two answers. The question dealt with the future of the Rose Garden that just opened.
Thank you. It's a great question. If you remember back, there was a capital campaign. Wow, it's been 3-4 years ago now. And one of the pieces that we have yet to address is an exercise area. And one of the plans now for the unoccupied Rose Garden is to work with our physical therapy company and to consider moving all of our exercise equipment from the basement upstairs so that it's bright and cheery. During all this transition, we wanted to test, is that movable wall sufficient enough to keep sound from moving back and forth? Because, get over an exercise area, we breathe hard, we make funny noises, and I do, I don't know about you, but I make funny noises. Will it bother people who are in the employee dining area? We found that wall is very efficient in keeping sound within the room. So given some time and now working with our physical therapy company to design how that room can be reconfigured. And by design, we're not talking a lot of remodeling. We might paint, we might consider flooring, but that's going to be about it. But then moving the equipment upstairs and maybe adding more equipment so that we have a more comprehensive exercise area. We would hope too that maybe some of the group exercise like Tai Chi, it's a large enough room that groups like that could meet in there to have their exercise and get out of the basement. So that's in part what we have our site set for that space.
You had mentioned a second question? The question dealt with having a dish of candy available for employees stopping by the room to do something.
Something like that is just fine. There's no issue with that at all. Yeah, we prefer that it be wrapped candy. But yeah, that's fine. The concern really comes into more monetary value type items or cash, larger gifts. Yeah. That's a very good question. So thanks for asking.
Thank you. Any other questions concerning any issues, concerns? Then I'd like to conclude by pointing out again that the Timbercrest Resident Council is elected by the members of the Timbercrest community. And that group serves as your source for information and a source for getting information to the administration. So if you do have any concern about anything in the Timberline, there is a list of all the members of the Timbercrest Council. Pick a name at random or somebody that you know and call them, bring up the question. They'll either have heard it before and they'll have the answer, or more likely they don't, but they'll know who to contact and we will find an answer for you. So we're a contact site. So Timbercrest Resident Council list in the Timberline would be who to go to. And thank you for coming today. I appreciate your attention and your attendance. And those of you that are viewing online, if you have any questions, give us a phone call and we'll find answers for you. Thanks again, and the meeting is adjourned, unless Stan remembered what he wanted. No, okay. The meeting is adjourned, and thank you.
I had a moment where you're going to say something about all resident council members and where they went, oh no, it's too early for that yet.
I'm glad I didn't think of it. And do we have actually a reservation from Peggy? The other individual is going to resign.
Well, in writing,
Or something that we can move forward with.
I have to go back and check, but I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
I didn't see anything, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, we'll double check that. On YouTube. On YouTube.